Hi everyone, my name is Terry Marks. I work at the American Institutes for Research, a partner on the Utah MTSS project. Welcome to this module, which addresses the UMTSS critical component of high-quality instruction. In part 1 of this module, we will delve into the role of effective instruction across academics and behavior to support student outcomes for both high-quality core instruction and subsequent tiered intervention, and will explore evidence-based programs and practices. First, let's reflect on your current instructional practices. Reflect. How do you identify research and evidence-based practices and programs in your classroom? Feel free to pause the video and jot down your reflections. Before we dive into what comprises effective instruction, it is important to first discuss research-based curricula, evidence-based programs, and evidence-based practices. No curriculum, intervention, strategy, practice, or framework should be considered unless there is some research or evidence to support its use. As defined by Cook and Cook in 2011, evidence-based practices, or EBPs, are instructional techniques with meaningful research support that represent critical tools in bridging the research to practice gap and improving student outcomes. EBPs are used across academics and social behavior and throughout the tiers in tandem with core curricula and subsequent tiered intervention programs. The Every Student Succeed Act provides us with ways to identify levels of evidence. Let's talk through these levels. A practice with strong evidence must have a randomized controlled trial, or RCT, that shows an impact on a particular student level outcome. Generally, there are two things that an RCT must include in its design. First, it must randomize students, classes, schools, etc. into treatment and control groups. And second, pre- and post-assessments must be collected for both groups. The measures should be the same at both time points. Moderate evidence comes from quasi-experimental designs. These are similar to RCTs in that there are treatment and control groups and pre- and post-assessments, but the big difference is that these designs do not randomly assign participants into treatment and control groups. The last category is promising evidence. Evidence would come from studies that are correlational in nature, meaning that they are non-experimental, but a researcher is measuring two variables to assess the statistical relationship between them without controlling for other variables. As an example, they might be looking at the relationship between technology use or access and student mathematics performance. At the Tier 1 or core universal level, research and standards-based curricula are typically used. This means that the components like the scope and sequence, sample problems, and pacing are aligned to grade level standards and have been researched and been found to be generally effective, although the curriculum materials have not been rigorously evaluated as a complete package. What's important to point out is that the stronger the evidence for each component or part of your research-based curriculum, the greater the likelihood that your core instruction will result in positive student outcomes. And when selecting core curricula, you want to look for curricula that embed or can be taught using evidence-based practices such as explicit instruction or peer-assisted learning. This will further strengthen your instruction. For social behavior, our core instruction should focus on proactive structures and routines that all students are expected to know, practice, and demonstrate, such as school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports. Across academics and social behavior, evidence-based programs are commonly used during Tier 2, secondary or targeted, and Tier 3 intensive levels of support. Evidence-based programs are likely what you think of as intervention packages that provide teaching scripts, fidelity measures, a structured sequence of skills, and are focused on targeted areas of need. To be considered evidence-based, these programs must meet the previously discussed ESSA definitions. When packaged, evidence-based programs are not available, educators may build their own intervention package that is composed of evidence-based practices, keeping in mind what evidence-based really means. At the Tier 3 or intensive level, evidence-based practices or programs are used as a platform or starting point and then adapted based on student data to meet unique student needs. In addition to what we've already shared, there's a few other things we should be cognizant of. The first is that a hammer is effective, but not with a screw. This means that a curriculum or intervention, that is the hammer, will only work, demonstrate positive impacts, with the right population and on the same outcome as the curricula or intervention was shown to have impact on through the research. In other words, if what we're using was only studied in a suburban district and we are in an urban setting, we may not see the same results. The hammer adage may be familiar, but I'm going to add to the adage. A hammer is a tool, just like our curricula, interventions, and practices. It's what we do with them that ensures we see the same outcomes as the researchers found. Our instruction is what drives the hammer. We'll talk about this more throughout this module and the second part. We're also going to spend a bit more time on evidence-based practices and programs now, including where to locate them and what we should be looking for. So where can we find evidence-based practices and programs? There are several tools that have been developed to help educators identify evidence-based practices and programs across the MTSS tiers. Some sites have information specific to evidence-based programs, curricula, or interventions, while others may focus more in depth on specific evidence-based practices. The following sites can help teachers, instructional leaders, and administrators identify evidence-based practices, strategies, and curricula. First is the Evidence for ESSA website, which has a goal to provide clear and authoritative information on programs that meet the ESSA evidence standards that we've already reviewed and enable educators and communities to select effective educational tools to improve student success. The What Works Clearinghouse is a website and an initiative of the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. The What Works Clearinghouse was created in 2002 to be a central and trusted source of scientific evidence for what works in education. Through systematic reviews to identify rigorous research, the What Works Clearinghouse provides educators with credible and reliable evidence that can be used to make informed decisions about evidence-based instructional practices, curricula, and/or programs and practices. The Center on Instruction was one of 5 national content centers funded by the U.S. Department of Education. The center's website includes research, practitioner guides, PD modules, and training materials, tools, and resources for teachers and leaders, and information on standards and assessment. The IRIS Center is a national center which is funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP. The IRIS Center provides free, online, interactive training that translates research into practice. The goal of IRIS is to serve college and university faculty who are preparing the next generation of school personnel, including special education professionals, as well as to serve professional development providers who conduct in-service training for practicing educators. Another OSEP-funded center, the National Center on Intensive Intervention, or NCII, has developed a tools chart that includes ratings of academic and behavior interventions. The website also contains implementation support for leaders, teachers, and parents when conducting Tier 3 data-based individualization. Likewise, the Council for Exceptional Children, or CEC, has developed a set of videos primarily for special educators, introducing a set of high-leverage practices, many of which also have a strong evidence base for their use, including providing positive and constructive feedback, systematically designing instruction to support learning goals, using explicit instruction, and using strategies to promote active student engagement. We'll take a look at some of these practices and others as we go through this module, and each of these resources is linked in the resources page at the end of this module. Now that you know reputable sources for identifying research-based curricula and evidence-based programs, we'll take a closer look at the following. 1, what we need to consider when selecting an evidence-based practice or program, and 2, what's needed in actual classroom practice to ensure effective implementation. So what do we need to consider when selecting an evidence-based practice or program? Fuchs, and Malone in 2017 depicted a taxonomy of intervention intensity. That taxonomy of intervention intensity is a framework that can be used for evaluating and building intervention intensity, and it's based in the research. The taxonomy helps us understand the evidence and includes the following domains: strength, dosage, alignment, attention to transfer, comprehensiveness, behavioral and/or academic support, and individualization that should be considered when we're selecting an evidence-based practice or program and/or determining where to prioritize first for intensifying an existing practice or program that's being implemented. Why might you need to intensify an evidence-based practice or program? Even when you find an evidence-based practice or program from a reputable source like the ones we linked to earlier, there may be some students, especially students with more intensive needs or those with disabilities, who will need additional practice and/or opportunities to respond and receive feedback than the program incorporates in its standard delivery. The taxonomy provides guidance around where we might be able to intensify after we've selected the evidence-based practice or program. We've linked to taxonomy resources at the end of this module as well. There are archived webinars and additional resources to explore on NCII's website. But right now, let's walk through each of the taxonomy domains together. The following are the domains in the taxonomy for academics. The first is strength. Strength refers to how well the program works for students with intensive intervention needs, expressed in terms of effect sizes. The next is dosage. Dosage refers to the number of opportunities a student has to respond and receive corrective feedback. These opportunities may be increased by changing the size of the instructional group, the number of minutes each session lasts, and/or the number of sessions provided per week. But just changing the time doesn't guarantee that students are responding and receiving corrective feedback. Next is alignment. Alignment refers to how well the program addresses the target student's full set of academic skill deficits. The next domain is attention to transfer. This refers to the extent to which an intervention is designed to help students transfer the skills they learned during intervention to other contexts and realize connections between related skills. Comprehensiveness refers to the number of explicit instruction principles the intervention incorporates. For example, providing explanations in clear, concise language, modeling efficient solution strategies instead of expecting students to discover strategies on their own, etc. Also, another domain is including behavioral supports for students. This may include incorporating behavioral supports related to self-management or executive functioning within academic intervention. The last domain is individualization. Individualization is when the intervention is responsive to the progress monitoring data to address a student's complex learning needs. The domains in the behavior taxonomy are the same as in academics, but the dimensions are defined in slightly different ways. When looking at an intervention with strength, this refers to ensuring that the intervention being implemented is identified as an effective program by a reliable source such as the What Works Clearinghouse or the NCII Tools Chart. Finding interventions from a reputable source is key. In behavior, dosage refers to the number of opportunities a student has to respond or practice and demonstrate the skill, receive positive feedback through praise, tokens, points, etc., exchange for backup reinforcers, and receive corrective feedback. Alignment refers to how well the program addresses school-wide expectations, addresses classroom and/or teacher expectations, addresses students' skill deficits, matches rewards to students' preferences and/or the function of their problem behavior, and does not address extraneous skills. Attention to transfer in behavior is similar to transfer in academics in that it emphasizes how and when a student uses skills across contexts or situations and includes opportunities to practice using skills across those situations. Comprehensiveness refers to the extent to which the intervention includes a plan for teaching appropriate behavior, adjusting antecedent conditions to prevent problem behavior, reinforcing appropriate behavior, minimizing reinforcement for problem behavior, fading supports, monitoring fidelity, working in conjunction with related services, and communicating with parents and families. Academic support is the extent to which the program can be easily integrated within context of academic instruction, complements rather than supplants academic focus, and includes procedures for reinforcing responses related to academic achievement, such as engagement or completion. Individualization is the same in behavior as it is in academic and refers to using a database process for individualizing intervention based on progress monitoring data. You'll now complete an activity to explore the taxonomy in more depth.